in just a moment. Before we get started in looking at the local performance indicators, however, we wanted to take a moment and do what we do in our county, and that is to re-ground everyone in the purpose of the evaluation rubrics and all of this work that we're doing. And what we often use is the Blueprint for Great Schools, version 2.0, the quote about the California way. I'll give you a moment to read it. We think it's very important each and every time to remind everyone of the intention of our accountability system so that even when we're getting this information and sometimes the tools might be a little imperfect, that our approach to accountability is grounded in the tenets that the state board, that the governor, that the superintendent of public instruction, CDE, and all of us believe in and agree upon. And that is the commitment to local control and to a transparent, inclusive accountability system that's grounded in continuous improvement and that secures accountability through both the internal and the external accountability. So as we're taking a look at this today, we want to keep that idea in mind. So as we do, we also would like to share with you this, this graphic that's coming in little by little. Sorry about that. And an essential part of those supports that the state is looking to provide for all of us and for our districts include the LCFF rubrics. And as we work through this section today, what we do is invite you to think about this graphic and to keep in mind how the elements of the LCFF rubrics and the LCAP metrics are intended to be integrated and triangulated to improve your plans. At our last training, both Kern and Tulare counties did such a nice job of engaging us in that work and thinking about that work, so we'll come back to it at the end of this section for some dialogue today. And so just as a reminder, the three statutory purposes of the LCFF rubrics include supporting our LEAs in identifying strengths and weaknesses, as well as assisting in the determination of eligibility for both technical assistance and more intensive interventions that will be explained a little bit later by Amy, Diana, and Michelle. But as we discuss every single time, the focus this year is really on the strengths and weaknesses. You've also seen this slide before when we worked on the left side in Training 1, and today we're going to focus in on the local indicators. There are the 6 local indicators, and we'll talk about all of them conceptually and then focus in on the 4 that were acted upon by the state board. We bring this quote up because in just a moment we're going to look at some of the differences between the state indicators and the local performance indicators. Because as we know, not everything that's important and not everything that counts is quantitative or can be counted. So when we start to compare the state indicators and the local indicators, we have 4 main areas that we think are important in creating that distinction. So as you take a look, first, one of the big differences is how they will be populated. So on the state indicator side, what we'll see, and what we saw with the top-level data displays, is those are pre-populated for our LEAs with already existing data. And Judy shared the sheet this morning about the denominators and the English learners. It also has that column about what the source of the data is as well. On the other hand, the local indicators will be populated by the rubrics that David told us about this morning. And so we will be populating those with the analysis and progress from the local data and report on performance. The second characteristic that differentiates the state indicators from the local indicators is when the data was collected. And so for the state indicators, we know that that is trend data that comes from the most recently certified CalPADS data. So it's not always as current as, say, the local indicators, which our districts and our county offices and charter schools will be collecting in the current year or maybe in a few cases in the prior year. So the data come from kind of 2 different time frames. Third is one of the things that was a struggle overall, and that is that the state indicators are all about that status of matrix, or that matrix of status and change. It is primarily quantitative data. On the other hand, things like standards implementation, parent engagement, perceptions of school climate tend to be a mix. While there's some quantitative data, it's primarily qualitative and perception data. And finally, the idea of the performance categories or the criteria. We know there are 5 performance categories or criteria in the state indicators, ranging from blue to red. However, in the local indicators, we really just have 3. In fact, it's almost kind of Boolean, met or not met, with the persistence of not met for 2 years. So met, and not met for 2 years. I'm going to pause for a moment, let you take a look at that. And then I want to give you an opportunity to, this is just an engagement strategy to prepare for a little bit of inquiry and understanding, and it's called See, Think, Wonder. You probably see it in your classrooms. But just reviewing the last slides, as well as what you've heard and what you know, I'm going to give you a few moments just to jot down something that you see, something that you think, and something that you wonder related to the local performance indicators. And I'm going to give you about 42 seconds to do it. You may begin now. 42 seconds. See, think, wonder. Go. I don't even have a second hand on my watch, so I'm faking it. Okay, I know that felt like 44 seconds, but it was 42. So now I'm going to give you a minute with a neighbor, a minute with a near neighbor, and each of you are going to share 2 of your 3 see, think, and or wonder. So you'll share them, you'll say a few words about them, and then you'll keep these close by, because as we work through, we're going to come back to this and see what we've expanded on your see, your think, and your wonder. So 1 minute with a partner, elbow partner, near neighbor. Share 2 of your 3, your choice. Go. Anyone want to share a wondering? Anyone want to share a wondering? This is your window of opportunity. I've got wait time, people. I've got wait time. Yes, in your loudest voice.
I wonder, how are we going to be arriving at some consistency in the data gathering and reporting of the local indicators?
Wondering about consistency. What else? Sue.
I wonder how some of our really small districts are going to be able to pull this off.
Wondering how some of our really small districts are going to pull this off. Let's take one more. Jamie.
I wonder how the data will be transferred to the state and they'll get the local indicator data.
So you're wondering how it's going to make its way public.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So keep this close, keep it in mind as we work through this section. And so the way we're going to approach this section is, first, we will address what it actually means to meet the standard. Then we'll have a little bit of time to discuss the use of these tools for planning. And then all of that will make its way into the afternoon as well. So I hope we answer your wonderings and your questions. So in terms of the local indicators, as you saw on the graphic earlier, the local indicators are around priorities 1, basic conditions of school, and 6, which will be a local climate survey, and also around priorities 9 and 10, which are about coordination of services for foster youth and for expelled youth. The state board did not act in November on priorities 2 and 3, so we'll talk a little bit more about those in January. at the January training. So in general, the idea here with the local performance indicators is that our LEAs will self-evaluate using self-assessments and/or a menu of local measures. In some cases, the LEAs will be provided with these self-assessment tools and/or a menu and report progress through the evaluation rubrics. One of the questions that we always get is, well, what if we already have a tool? And we're going to address that by each of the priorities or each of the local indicators. And for the most part, the answer is yes, you can continue to use what you have. And then the other piece is following the reporting out of the self-assessment and local the local measures of progress, LEAs will self-assess using one of those three criteria. Did we meet the standard? Did we not meet it? Or have we not met it now for 2 years? And so the question often becomes, how do we get to that idea of meeting the standard? How do we get that feeling of we're in good shape? And so one of the things that's very interesting is when we think about non-quantitative measures, these are qualitative measures, we don't have cut scores, if you will. In the use of this, what it's really grounded in is it's about the engagement in the process, about the analysis for the continuous improvement, and the transparency of reporting the results, with obviously the expectation that those results and that analysis would be incorporated into the plan. So what it's not about is that there's a cut score like 70% of students need to feel connected to school or you haven't met the standard. So it's a real shift from all of the quantitative measures that measure that. In fact, it's really not about the results of the survey or the level of progress that the LEA has made that determines the criteria. But where that comes in is truly within the LCAP. So if a district, a charter school, or a county office of education is using one of these tools and recognizes that they're not making the progress, we would expect it to show up in that area of greatest need. Or we would expect to see it in the actions, the services, and the goals, even in the annual measurable outcomes. However, it's not about marking yourself as not met just because you didn't make the progress that you had hoped to. You'll see that a little bit more as Dan goes through each of these individually. But I know in talking with our districts, that was a huge shift. Their expectation was there would be cut scores for climate. There would be cut scores for student engagement, for parent engagement, or some way of doing that. And really it's about the process, the analysis, the transparency, and then ultimately expecting that you incorporate that into your plan. So for that, we just want to make sure that we're all using the same vocabulary. When we take a look at each of these in depth, you'll see these three terms: standard, evidence, and criteria. The standard describes the expectation for self-assessment in that priority. The evidence describes the relevant data instruments for self-assessing and reporting progress that we might use relative to those standards. And finally, the criteria are the indicators, or how you measure yourself as met, or not met for 2 years. Oops. Okay, so just one final word before we go into each of these. As you're thinking about the tools, something that I truly appreciate about our state board, many things I truly appreciate about our state board, and one of them is the fact that they're really struggling with this inherent tension between trying to provide tools for us. If we go back to the California way, it's really about providing those tools and being able to have some common language and even being able to support our districts, our charter schools, and our COEs. But we have to balance that with the idea that we want to avoid this sense of compliance, so that when we look at a tool for self-assessment, when it's a singular tool, it doesn't come across that we've taken the local out of local control, or that we have this tool that might have limited validation. And so really, we want to stay grounded as we're thinking about the tools and we see the actions that happen in January going forward, is that they really are intended to be supports and not compliance pieces. So with that, we're going to dig into the 4 that we do have action on. And so help me in welcoming my dear tall friend, Dan Peverini.
Like Ellen said, David taken action in the 4, 1, 6, 9, and 10, and we will delve a little bit into 2 and 3, just to make sure that we kind of understand a little bit what they're asking for there as well. You have a goldenrod handout that looks like this, and I'm going to ask you guys to go to the second page, and at the top of it, it should say Coordination of Services for Foster Youth, Priority 10. And what we're going to talk about is what are the standard evidence and criteria asking us to do in each one of these different indicators. And the things that we'll be looking for are frequency, the indicator content, or what's the measurement that it's trying to get us to look at, the accountability or transparency, not only to the school board but also to stakeholders and the public, as well as what is the tool that they want us to use, and where does it come from. So if we look at number 10, and this is the same information that you have, I'm going to give you guys 47.5 seconds to go ahead and look at this one and read it. So when we pull out the key pieces of it, we can see that in that first sentence right there, there's a frequency. How often do they need to do this? Annually. What is it that they're trying to get to measure, or what's that indicator content? And it's progress in coordinating services for foster youth. What are we doing with the results, or what's the transparency piece on this? And it's reporting at a regularly scheduled meeting of the local governing board. And this was a shift. At first it said a governing board meeting. They said, no, a regularly scheduled meeting. Parents really wanted to be able to have an opportunity to be present and be able to comment on what was being shared by the districts, as well as stakeholders in the public through the evaluation rubrics. If we look at the evidence, yes, it's the use of a self-assessment tool. And this particular tool is included in the evaluation rubrics web-based user interface. So going back to what Ellen was sharing earlier, if we wanted to look at how do we get to MET for priority 10, frequency, is it being done annually? Check. Are we measuring progress in coordinating services for foster youth? Are we reporting the results at a regularly scheduled public meeting for the governing board? Are we sharing the results for stakeholders and the public through the evaluation rubrics? And are we using the included self-assessment tool? If you have done all of those things, you have met. So here's what the self-assessment tool looks like. And I'm going to go back to what Ellen was saying a little bit earlier. You will notice, and this is in the back of that page, so that second page, the back of it will be the self-assessment tool. I really do want you guys to look at it. If you look across the top, you will see, and my eyesight fails me, so I have to bring my reading glasses. Starting from the left-hand side, they're in the exploration and research phase. Moving forward, beginning development, initial implementation, full implementation, and sustainability. It's going to be up to each COE to determine where they sit on this, on all of those components on the left-hand side. And again, meeting is not whether you're at 5 with full implementation and sustainability. You could be all over the place here. It's the fact that you engaged with this tool, that you took an honest assessment as to where your county office is and where it needs to go next. How are you using this inside the LCAP template moving forward? Any questions on this piece here? So we want to offer you an opportunity to show your brilliance, because this is a group of brilliant people. So please attend to the following. Make eye contact with somebody next to you, and they will become your partner. Determine who is tall and less tall. I was told I couldn't say vertical giftedness here, so we're going with that description. And then have the handout ready with 6 and 9. That'll be the first page. And finally, smile at the presenter so that he knows that you are ready to go. And like the rubrics, this is not about the quality of the smile, the fact that you engaged with a smile. So if you are ready, and I see a lot of smiles out there. We will be doing an A, B, each teach. So partner A, you will be the tall person. And if there was any dispute, you can stand up and check. And high heels do count towards elevating your tallness. Partner B will be less tall. And partner A, you will read priority 6. Partner B, you will read the indicator for priority 9. So please read and highlight the 5 key elements for meeting the standard. We'll give you guys roughly 2 minutes to do that. Then partner A will teach partner B what was it that was inside of theirs for 1 minute. Partner B, we're going to ask you to paraphrase what your partner said in about 30 seconds. We're going to switch that. And once we finish that, you will be officially a brilliant person. So we'll give you 5 minutes total for this, and here are the things that you're looking for. Once again, the frequency, the indicator content, accountability, transparency, and tool. And go ahead and get started. We can start coming back together again, and you can certainly finish these conversations at lunch. So let's look it over and see how we did. So priority 6. Frequency. At least every other year. I included at least 1 grade level within the grade span as part of the frequency so that you know that you don't have to do it with every single grade level that you have. How many of you guys got that right? Give yourselves a cheer. Indicator content. Valid measure of perceptions of school safety and connectedness. How will it be determined? You're administering a survey, and we'll come back to that in a second. And what's the accountability and transparency? And I think you're going to notice that these repeat themselves a lot, and all of these right here is reporting the results to the local governing board and through the local data selection option and evaluation rubric. So if we jump to the local data reporting interface, there is quite a bit of information here too. This is probably one of the densest ones that we have so far. In that, in some ways, accountability and transparency of results continues in here as well, because it is saying that what you will provide, and it is asking for a narrative summary and analysis of a local climate survey. The tool is, again, forgive that errant arrow there, is that local climate survey. Now, is the local climate survey defined within what you read? Thumbs up if it was defined, thumbs down if it was not. There was a suggestion. You can use Healthy Kids Survey, but you don't have to. You can choose to do it every year if you wanted to, but you don't have to. The minimum is every other year. So again, when we look at getting to MET, is it being done every minimum of every other year to one grade level in a grade span? Does it measure perceptions of school safety and connectedness? Are the results reported according to what it's asking? And are you using a local climate survey, checks or other? So jumping over to number 9. Again, what is the annual? This is the frequency. Progress in coordinating instruction is your indicator content. Accountability and transparency of results is similar. Once again, defining how progress will be measured, use of that self-assessment tool, and the tool is included in the evaluation rubrics. And you should have seen the tool right below. And I'm going to go through these a little quicker. I think you guys kind of got this. The annual, measurement, the reporting, and the tool. And once again, the tool looks extremely similar to the last one, and you will see a lot of words like coordinating, identifying, working with the districts, and establishing those things. So let's jump over to priority 1. You don't have this one in front of you. This one was not talked about as much. It was acted on, but it wasn't talked as much, and it wasn't put in the same format as the others. So the basic conditions, they're looking for rate of teacher misassignments, student access to standards aligned instructional materials, and other facilities in good repair. Basically, are you meeting your Williams settlement requirements? Are you promptly addressing any complaints or other deficits identified through the academic year? And once again, are you providing this information to the governing board, stakeholders, et cetera? The evidence, you're using your local available data, your FIT reports, and all of those things. It's basically all of the information you're putting into your SARC. I share all of this with you because all of this is already in place. Check. It's done. The beauty of this is if you are using the state SARC, what they're saying is that's built on the same platform as the rubrics, and it should automatically populate into it. So you will have a lot less work to do there as far as reporting. So priority 2, implementation of state standards. Put these in yellow because I want us to be a little bit different on this one. They haven't acted on these yet, but there is some information we know. So that's on the left-hand side of the slide. We know the frequency annually. We know what they're looking for, progress in implementing state academic standards. Again, the reporting or the accountability or the transparency is the same. What we don't yet have defined, and I'm pulling language from the September 2016 SBE, is that annual measurement or that evidence yet. They haven't quite decided how they want to tackle that. So they did include this language in there, which may include use of a self-assessment tool or selection from a menu of local measures that will be included in the evaluation rubrics web-based user interface. If we look at draft priority number 3, again, it's that this is the parent engagement. It's going to be annual, and it's going to be measuring progress in seeking input from parents in decision-making and promoting parental participation in programs. Again, same reporting. And once again, on the right-hand side, information not yet defined from the September 2016 is what is that self-assessment tool or selection going to be looking like. So this is where we want your help going into the next training in January. Because since we don't have a selection or self-assessment tools yet available, we want to be able to begin to generate what might be useful for our districts to use in evaluating these 2 priorities. So we need you. And we would love for you guys to share any tools that you are using or that your districts are using to look at state standards implementation and to look at parent engagement and how they're gauging those things. And please forward them to Judy Flores, and here's our email. If you need to write it down, it is also available in your presenter's agenda. It was towards the top right there. I saw it written down. So by all means, please share all of those things. She will be sharing it with the team developing the 4th session. And hopefully we'll be able to get some great tools that everybody can use. And with that, I'm passing it off to Ellen,
Your less tall friend.
my last tall friend.
Hey, great job, everyone, on the Each Teach. So as we move forward and we take a look at the local indicators, the local performance indicators, we just want to pause on Tony Brike's quote about achieving improvements at scale. And this is the theme that is reiterated time and time again, that what we're recognizing is that there isn't one way to do this, but it's really contextualized and depends on the conditions of our districts. So what we'd like to do is to have a little bit of time to come back to this. I don't know what happened to my animations, but you'll all forgive me and you won't judge. So, as I said at the beginning, Kern County and Tulare County did some great work with us at the last training about root cause analysis, and you had phenomenal conversations about that. And what we'd like to do is now bring in the other part of the rubric that we looked at today. And so what we do know is that for root cause analysis and improvement, we have to triangulate several things. So we do have the quantitative data, and that quantitative data, the qualitative data, and the research and model practices. In terms of quantitative data, we took a look at the top level indicators that we were able to disaggregate, look at the school level, look at the subgroup level, but also to combine those with the local measures, the targets, the annual measurable outcomes, taking a look at our district's annual updates and all of the analysis that happens there. There's a great deal of quantitative data that we have to look at. Secondly, we have the qualitative or the perception data, including these local performance indicators. And finally, the research and model practices that really tell us what to do once we've figured out what we need to work on. And so with this in mind, we want to give you a few moments to have a conversation. And so what we invite you to do is to choose a priority area that you've been thinking about. One that might be on your mind because we were just engaged in it is school climate, engagement, or perhaps if you work at a county office and you're writing a plan, coordination of services. And what we invite you to do is to think about what data triangulation conversations might sound like and look like. And what we mean is, as you think about one of these areas, and you think what's available to us through the rubrics, through the quantitative data, the data display, through the qualitative data tools, through the parts of the LCAP that our districts are already engaging in, as well as the research and model practices. How might we see our districts? How might we see our county offices integrating many of those things? So we're going to give you about 6 or 7 minutes to have that conversation. Then we'll come back and wrap up this section answering a few questions. So given those directions, what questions might you have about the process? You actually get to talk to each other now, so have at it. Okay, check in about 6 minutes. So on the Google Doc, and as I was walking around, several questions emerged. And I think there's an area that people feel really trying to wrap our heads around. And that is the idea that you can mark yourself as met when you may not have made the progress in these areas that you had hoped to. And so it's a real switch. If you think about the fact, however, that this is not a quantitative indicator, there are not cut scores. This is a local indicator. And this is where that part of the continuous improvement process comes to life. So I don't know if this helps, but I'm going to throw it out there and see if it does. But for me, when I think about this, I say, well, you've met the criteria that is about continuous improvement. And part of this is this shift in what is accountability as we're making sense of things. So it's going to be very important to share with your LEAs, with your districts, with your charter schools, with your county offices, that it will be just as important as it is in all the work that we've done to be very transparent, very straightforward in terms of the fact that this is what we did, this is the progress we made, this is the progress we didn't make, and then it will be very evident in the LCAP that you have addressed it. So there are some analogies to the work when we first started thinking about stakeholder engagement and annual update about the transparency and being forthright about where you are, because it is a continuous improvement process. So that might help in wrapping your head around it. You know, we talked about this with our superintendents on Monday in our county, and at first they had that same reaction. Who's not going to mark themselves as met? Are you kidding me? How is that transparent? And then when they started talking about the triangulation, that many of you had these conversations, whether it was how's school climate and the school climate survey with your suspension data, with your attendance data, how all of those help you tell your story and figure out what to do next. Or in another instance that several people shared, the interrelationship between your standards implementation and your student academic achievement, how those will interact. That's the intentionality, that you engage in that process and that it helps you actually move the district forward. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there's another question. Okay, so Judy, you've got several questions.
That have been written down.
Okay, let's see how I do.
All right. Is there one location, one place all the local indicator tools are located?
Is there one place that all the local indicator tools are located? And if you look very carefully at the information that Dan gave out, what most of them say is within the evaluation rubrics. So because we haven't seen that interface yet, and we know that we will, it will be within that user interface that, that David shared with us this morning, as far as we know. Good. Next question.
Okay. Is there a tool for priority 6 beyond Healthy Kids Survey?
I'm going to answer that. There are probably 100 tools. Many of your districts may have a tool. So locally found tools, sharing of tools are all available. There hasn't been one yet that has been identified by the state board outside of the California Healthy Kids Survey. As you know, also within the California Healthy Kids Survey, you can customize it a bit too, so you can really make it work for you, but you can use it if you don't have another tool. If you have another tool, you may use it.
All right. On indicators 9 and 10, is there an expectation that LEAs use the proposed self-assessment tool since it is included in the web-based user interface?
As far as I know. So that is the expectation. I think that that would be a great question. I'm seeing Nancy Brownell. I'm seeing other people. Is Eileen here? Other people who've worked with the state board. As far as we know, that's the one that you will be using. And Judy, anything you can add on that?
So all of these questions we will leave in here as questions. We will answer them and then share them with both CDE and the state board so that they can weigh in on them as well. And then we will send these out in January after our last training when we have answers to all of them.
I really do appreciate the questions because that's how we get to coherence, is by asking and answering questions together.
So one more question.
Oh,
for
boy.
you.
Okay.
Given today's explanation, under what circumstances would a district mark themselves as unmet?
So, if we were to go back to Dan's check marks, one condition would be that the district didn't engage in using, let's say we take priority 6, for example. You didn't engage in giving it every year or every other year. You didn't engage in doing it at least every other year, or you didn't meet the grade span, or you didn't share the results at a regularly scheduled public board meeting, or you didn't upload. But you know, if you go back to the check marks, as long as you hit the check marks, then you met. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay, so just as we're finishing up, go back to your own See, Think, Wonder And as you revisit your original responses, feel free to add for your own purposes what you have learned and what you have discussed with the folks in your group about this section. You might have new thinking, you may have new wondering. And as we make the transition to the next section, I'm actually going to invite up Judy first, because as you know, Judy is everybody's proxy and the professional substitute, and she'll explain a little bit about subbing in an MVP, which is herself. So take a moment, take a look at it, and we'll take it from there. Thank you.